I've been looking forward to this day for so many weeks now. We've been talking to so many people about this workshop, and it's the first time I've ever done it for free. And it's going to be so great. I am Dean. We'll get to me in a second. I'm with Dr. V and John. We'll get to them in a second. We're going to try and see if all of this stuff is working out. Guys, you can hear me, right? I assume.
You sound lovely.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Oh, by the way, I have the Winston-Salem thing up here, partly because that's where I live, and partly because it is a city that's done a pretty good job of repositioning itself. It used to just be known because R.J. Reynolds, the big tobacco company, is based here, and a lot of the money that started Winston-Salem is all tobacco money. But now it's very much sort of a tech innovation, a little tiny tech innovation hub, and sort of a city of the arts. It's done a pretty good job of repositioning itself.
Winston tastes
Plus,
good
it's a
like a
pretty
city should.
picture.
Yeah.
So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. If you're watching on the replay, thanks for watching on the replay. Don't forget to get your workbook because we're going to go through 21 questions. And it's super helpful to have the workbook because you can write in your own answers. And so it's not just a consumable entertainment piece, but you come away with the elements you need to have your redefined, rewritten story as you describe yourself and get people interested in what you do and whether they should hire you or buy from you or whatever else you want them to do from you. I'm Dean Waye. We run this show. We have a Thursday show that runs every week at noon, and actually Tuesdays and Wednesdays as well. And I'm with two regular contributors, which is Dr. V and John Paduchak. I'm going to hand over in just 30 seconds, give them a little time to describe who they are and what they're doing. I do want to point out that in case for some reason you did not happen to get, if you're watching the replay and you came in very much later, it's possible you didn't get the email, one of the two emails today that explains this link, the WayeCreative.com/event, which is where you can download the workbook. You can either get it as a Google Doc, you can download it directly to your computer as a Word doc. There's a couple other booklets and stuff there that's bonuses that are yours for free, go with God kind of thing. And there's also some links, which I think Dr. V or John will describe in a second, about their upcoming stuff and workshop. That's later on from this one. So I'm Dean. In case you've never seen me before, especially if you came in from maybe Dr. V's audience or John's audience and people that we don't know, I'm a sales copywriter, a leads copywriter, and I've been fortunate enough since going out on my own just a little over 2 years ago to have had clients on every continent except Antarctica, right? There doesn't seem to be a lot of sales and marketing and copywriting being done in Antarctica. But I ask everyone, and I'm asking you, if you know anyone in Antarctica now, I would love to be able to find one client there just to complete my continental global set and say that I've had clients on every continent. But for now, I'm stuck with every place except there.
Penguin positioning at one of the research stations. That's
what I need, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but if I ask enough people, I will eventually find someone who knows someone, and I'm in. I
actually know a couple people there right now.
So you're killing me.
I might be able to help you.
You're killing me.
I just found out recently, believe it or not.
We do this show every day, 3 days a week, and we're killing. Anyway, this is the positioning workshop, sometimes called the rent-free positioning workshop. Rent-free because the idea is to get you to live in someone else's head rent-free without a big advertising spend or whatever, just with a compelling story. We're going to get to the key point of how this is all going to happen in just like 1 or 2 slides from now. But I'm going to turn it over to John first and then Dr. V, so there's no confusion about order, and let them describe who they are and what they're going to be contributing today. Go ahead, John.
Great. Hey, first of all, I just want to say hello to everybody. We've got some people from all over the place today. I even see somebody from Hadley, Mass near me, so that's kind of exciting. My name's John Paduchak. I'm a video marketing expert. I live in the Boston area, in New Hampshire to be exact. And, I work primarily with streaming video and short video, and it's automation. So to apply all different principles to make it easier to fit in your business. And we all know we need to do more video.
We all need more video.
Dr. V. Dr. V, the infamous Dr. V. I'm Dr. Christopher Vogelman. I live out here on the left coast in San Diego, Coronado Island to be specific. And John and I actually have partnered together creating an agency with coast-to-coast coverage called Epic Win Media. And I also focus a great deal on short form video and personal branding to extend the reach of professionals. Most of my work's been with doctors, helping them to create online businesses so that they can escape their practice forever. Basically, escape the office and enjoy life more fully.
All right, good stuff. Let's jump into this. We've got a tight 90 minutes and we're already almost 8 minutes in. The goal by the end of this, by the way, is that you will have all of the elements to build your own story, but it's not a template. It's not a formula. We're going to go through 21 questions that I've done. I've done this exercise in smaller forms and in larger forms. I think the last time we counted was 209, 211 something times, depending on how you counted it, over the last 2 years. So it's well vetted. And the questions themselves are well vetted. Let me tell you a story. There's an article from one of the dating sites. I honestly don't remember if it's Plenty of Fish or OkCupid, but I don't know if you know this, but most dating sites are not started by romantics. They're started by mathematicians and people who hire mathematicians. And of course, the idea is to find matches. And unlike, I think, Twitter, and I've literally never used Twitter, so you're just going to take my word that I know what I'm talking about, because I might not, is, people don't do a lot of the matching. Even then, algorithms are trying to figure out who you would best match with. What one of the sites found out several years ago, this group of mathematicians found out, is that they could ask 99 questions in a questionnaire, and they were very confident they could get within like 93% compatibility between two people based on interests and all kinds of stuff. But what they found was an anomaly in the data, in that one question, if they only asked one question of two people, they could achieve 87% compatibility just with the one question. And it's not a question you would have thought. The question was, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1, you hate them, 3, you're okay with them, 5, you're a fanatic. How do you feel about horror movies? Now, of course, your answer doesn't matter. The other person's answer doesn't matter. What matters is how close both of your answers are to each other. And it turns out that people who have very divergent tastes or fondness of horror movies tend not to work out relationship-wise. Just one of those little nuggets. All of these questions, or most of these questions, are very much like that. There used to be many more questions. Questions over time have been inserted in, and then others have been sort of cut out, because these are the questions that endured and got us everything we needed in the fewest number of sort of iterations and fewest number of questions. So we're going to get into that. The whole point here is to create a powerful positioning story for you, your business, or if you're looking for a job, for your career. And we're not going to talk about passions or superpowers or whys or anything like that. Okay. The goal, once we have all the elements, is that you should be able to, looking at the elements and what you've answered for these questions, tell your audience, a hiring manager, a prospect, a current customer that you want to spend more on you or whatever, tell them their story, but with you in it, instead of you trying to get them interested in your story. Now, all marketing can be, and selling for that matter, can be boiled down into just these 3 questions, right? What do I want? Who do I want it from? And why should they care or do it? What's in it for them? A lot of the positioning kind of exercises and workshops you might see are very much focused on the first question, and to some degree the second. But where the execution tends to fall down is on the third question. So this workshop is different. This positioning workshop is different. I'm presuming that you know roughly what you want, and that you know roughly the kind of person that you would want it from. You want the job from them. You want a new engagement from them. You want them to buy your book or whatever. So we're focused very much on the third part. Often, for most people, the very toughest part of how to tell someone their own story with you in it. Now, before we get into the questions, there are 2 notes on tone, or sometimes called in the copywriting world where I live, voice, for how your final product should sound and what should be in it. And I'm going to go over those now at the beginning, because I want you to remember as we go through the questions that you don't want to live in any other part of these 2 spectrums other than the sweet spot that I'm about to tell you about. The first one is the tone spectrum from left to right. So, of course, on the far right is aggressive. You never want to sound aggressive, whether you're telling your own story about yourself or you're telling someone else's story with you in it. You never want to sound aggressive, ever, ever, ever. The far end on the left of that is a sales term you see a lot called selling from your heels. Selling from your heels is when If someone looked at a transcript of what you said, it would sound like you're trying to persuade someone to do something. But if they looked at your physical actions, or they went by your tone of voice, it would be very different, because it would seem like you were trying to back off. You're trying to create more space, metaphorical or physical, between you and the person you're trying to persuade. You're trying to sort of back away from them. It usually comes from a fear of rejection. And so I really don't think this might be for you. And I'm sorry if I'm bothering you about this. And I've got to talk to a whole bunch of people for it, to see, whatever. Like anything where you sort of, it seems like you're trying to avoid conflict, avoid rejection. Remember, we're not looking for conflict. We're certainly not looking for rejection. We never want to be on the aggressive side of the scale. But you can't sell from your heels. You can't persuade from someone as you're backing away from them. It doesn't work. Most people, once they get past the selling from your heels phase, they end up in sort of the neutral objective phase. And this is where you're kind of agreeing with everything that someone else might say. And you're letting them know that you've thought about different things and you understand there are nuances. Yeah, there are lots of cases where my competitor is a way better suit for you or better suited for you than I am, and all this kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with being in the neutral or objective part of the spectrum. The problem is you can't only be there. You need to slip in there from time to time to agree and get along and be nice and small chat and not go out of your way to antagonize everyone. But the sweet spot in the whole thing is the assertive part. It's also the smallest area. But you're going to live, and when you end up writing your story based on these elements that we're going to go through today, you're going to live in the assertive part. Assertive is simply, I believe that X is true, and I'm willing to state that X is true. I believe that I can deliver results. I know that I'm good at what I do. I know that my company's product does X and Y, and it's very solid. I believe that we're the best thing on the market for this particular kind of problem, or for you as a customer, right? The most assertive things, internally you say, I believe. Externally, you don't even say the I believe part. You say, like, we're the best in the market for this particular customer. In your mind, you might think, I believe we're the best in the market for this particular customer. But you chop off any sort of qualifier around it. And instead, you just make the simple declarative sentence and statement. I believe we're the best for companies under $5 million in the Cincinnati market who are trying to grow their HVAC business. Simple as that. Now, besides left and right, and from selling from your heels and all the way over to aggressive, there's also an up and down. And this is the three sort of tone levels. By the way, this is the last sort of technical stuff. We're getting right into the questions after this. But almost everything that I read, and we do a show every Wednesday where someone in the chat or one of the guests gives me a search term or a URL that I've never seen before. If it's a search term, we put it in Google. We go to page 10 where no one goes, and we pick from at random some little company or something there. We did one yesterday. It was moving companies. Ended up being a moving company in the Northeast. And we go to their website. And what you find is that almost everything everyone writes and almost everything everyone tells anyone else about themselves in a positioning statement is all on level one. It's all informational. This is who I am and what I do, what I sell. This is who we are and what we make, or the market we work in, or whatever. It's all informational. And most of my clients are B2B. And so they all need to move up a lot of their messaging, and especially their positioning messaging, which is what you're going to be working on today, to the inspirational level. And inspirational flips it. It's not about me sending something out. It's about you receiving something in, right? So it's about you could be better. There's a negative present. If the present wasn't negative, there's no problem to solve. There's a positive future. You could be in the positive future as a company, as an individual, as a consumer, whatever, right? Most people will look at transformational and say, yeah, I want to be there. Most people don't want to be in transformational. Transformational is limited to just a handful of areas. All online courses, if you ever make an online course, by the way, you want to sell it, all online courses need to be sold as transformational. But other than that, it tends to be fitness, beauty, diet, self-help, that kind of stuff. You could be new. You don't really go into a company and say, you could be a new company. Most of them don't want to be a new company. They just want to be a better version of the company that they are now, or at least a version of the company they are now that doesn't have the particular problem you solve. So they're in a positive future. So remember, going backwards for a little bit, want to be on the assertive side, make short declarative statements whenever you can, take off the I believe or take off the ifs and any sort of conditional clauses, and try to spend at least 10 to 30% of your time in the inspirational level, because we're talking about them and their positive future. We want to try to tell them their story with you in it. Okay, 21 questions. Here we go. The questions break down into a few different sections, 1 to 5, pretty straightforward. Understand most of the time people show up, I've never met them before when we're doing this 1-to-1, which is sort of the paid version of this workshop. I don't know them. So I have a handful of questions where I just sort of establish a baseline, like what do you do? And who's your customer? And so on, just basic stuff. 6 to 9, we start thinking about your place in their positive future. Remember, there's a negative present and a positive future. And the negative present is a problem that you're going to solve for them. A positive future is where they live once you've solved their problem. 10 to 11, sort of the midpoint message. We'll get to that in a second. And then 12 to 21 is their context. 12 to 21 was added later. And these questions are all about you understanding in this customer's context how and by the way, you don't have to do this for every single customer. Your customers tend to fall into groups or have a single group. And so from 12 to 21, we're going to talk about various sort of strategy kind of context questions to help you understand and help them understand your place in their world. Okay, and before we jump in, one last time, there is a workbook. Go get it at wayecreative.com/event. The page is not going to be up forever, but it is up now, and it will be up for a few more days. Everything's color-coded in there. And then by the end of this, you'll have what you need to build their story with you in it. And then you just look at your answers, let it sort of bake in your head for a day or two, go back to your workbook and say, I know what I want to say. And you will write it. You'll be amazed how easy it is. All right, so we said the first questions were just baselining. It's very simple. What is your profession, or what does your business do, or what career are you in? And only once, Dr. V, have I ever had trouble with this question. Like, I literally had to talk to someone for 25 minutes before they could describe to me and tell me what their answer to number 1 is, what their business did, what it sold. And not surprisingly, that person had spent 20 plus years in marketing. And it was all high level puffery kind of language. And I kept trying to drill down and drill down and drill down. Turned out it was a very, very simple service. Like a 5-year-old would have understood it. It just took a while to get there. But we always baseline, excuse me, with like, what do you do? And the next one is, who's the reader or the listener in this case, or a viewer if you're doing it in video, right? Who's going to hire you, in quotes, or who's going to hire your service to do a job? And you try to keep this list as small as possible. So let's talk about why it needs to be as small as possible. Ideally, you could sum up in just a few words in one sentence who your target is. And I've had, most people, they want to try to appeal to everybody or as wide an audience as they can, figuring they're going to like throw out these seeds and then catch a bird that like lights down on a seed and tries to eat it, right? But it's almost impossible to get someone's attention or be considered, attention worthy if it's too generic. And so you want the smallest possible target that you can get to. And so, you can say CEOs of companies with revenue between $5 million and $50 million, and that's sort of a baseline. But then you should start drilling down and dialing in on that as much as possible. What industry are they in? What country are they in? Are they new to their job? Have they only been in the job for 2 years? I once ran a campaign where I looked for chief technology officers and did an email campaign to them, stipulating that the company had between 11 and 200 people, and they'd only been in the job for 2 years or less because they have a particular problem, right? When they're brand new to that job. You want to nail this down as much as you can because it makes everything else easier. Oh, I should say that if John and Dr. V, or John or Dr. V, are monitoring the chat, and if anyone puts in a question relevant, not relevant, relevant is a judgment call between you and me, related to the slide that's up or the questions that's up, guys, feel free to, I can't look at the chat while I'm doing this, but feel free to, let me know, and we'll see if we can answer questions as we go.
Sure. We're pretty chatty.
They are pretty chatty. Okay. So in their words, while they're brushing their teeth, how do they describe the problem they're looking to solve? This is often a tricky one for folks. So, and this is why we have the while they're brushing their teeth part of the question. When you're brushing your teeth or doing some other sort of manual action, your part of your brain is engaged in that, and another part of your brain gets to think about it. It's usually like an emotional type stuff. So, for instance, they would not describe their problem by saying, I'm looking for a dynamic, creative self-starter with 15 years of management in Midwestern corporate retail, familiar with working with a diverse team and dealing with accounting issues, right? That's clearly a straw man answer, right? And a straw man answer is an answer that you put up knowing that you're perfectly suited to answer it. That's not what they're thinking, though, right? They have some sort of emotional issue that they're dealing with, this prospect, this one person that you're trying to talk to. Closer to answering the creative retail manager with 15 years experience thing is, I really don't want to have another conversation this coming Monday with my VP where I have to explain yet again that I'm covering this open position and doing this job besides doing my own job because I can't find anyone to fill this slot. Like, that's their problem in their own words, right? The dread, the annoyance, all the stuff that they're feeling while they're brushing their teeth and thinking about that meeting with that VP who's going to call them on the carpet and say, just hire somebody. That's how we would do it. Oh, John, do you have a question? John, do you have a question?
No, and it seems Edmund was having trouble watching the LinkedIn. I wondered if we had another channel we could send him to.
You know, I checked my YouTube and everything else. For some reason, Restream refused to allow me to share. God
really?
knows why. Yeah.
It's for anyone who, for whatever reason, is not able to view it on LinkedIn, you can go to YouTube and do a search for WayeCreative, 2 words, I think. And that should bring you to the first result, or an early result should be my channel. You should see that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so remember, no straw man answers. In the simplest possible terms, understanding the emotion that this person is like feeling, and like what sort of small, concrete, atomic thing they wish didn't exist anymore. That's the problem that you're trying to write out here. And then, of course, is what's the positive future you shortcut them to? So in the case of our person who's our senior director who's looking for this manager for this retail group in the Midwest, right? She or he is looking forward to a positive future where this whole problem is taken off of her plate and she gets to focus on her own job, her own career, and gets to report to her VP that this issue has been solved. That's the positive future that let's say you're trying to get a job at this company. That's the positive future you're trying to put her into. Now we start getting into the trickier questions. So what's kept them from getting what they want? And understand that it's never their fault that they're in a negative present, even when it is their fault that they're in a negative present. It's not their fault. There's something else that's contributed to at least the problem that this company or this person is in. And if you've dealt with these types of customers enough, you have a pretty good idea of what's involved here. So maybe what you provide was never available before in a cost-effective way. Maybe you're so unique, the service you do is so different that it just wasn't available to anyone before. Maybe something had to happen, or they needed to reach a certain size, or they needed to, drop a product line. They needed to do something, or this person needed to do something, so that now a path to a positive future makes sense, and you're the sort of guide and the path to that positive future. But it's not their fault. You can't say, how would I put this? You can say in the second meeting, or when you get into sort of a deep dive meeting with them, you can go over like the problems that they have and possible causes. But make sure that you don't approach them from the beginning by blaming them for their own problem. Otherwise, they just turn you off and you don't even get to paragraph 2. Or you don't get to the third sentence when you're giving them the pitch. Okay? There's some other reason. And if you can't come up with a reason why it's not their problem, then skip this question. But do spend some time thinking about it. Because if you have, as part of the story, their story, that there's this other thing out here affecting their story that they had not paid attention to, that they didn't know existed, that is sort of like a new way for them to refashion their own rationale for the problem that they're having, that's fantastic. Like, that's gold right there, whenever you can do that. Okay, so about their problem and about the reason that they have this problem. What do you want to say it to them? Basically, what's your personal message to them to talk about that problem? Usually it starts with, if you're going to write it in your workbook, I fix this problem for people in your situation when A or B or C has happened, or A and B or C are true. If you want to use a formula, like a template for it. But this is the first time, by the way, that we really, other than asking you what you did for a living or what business you're in, this is the first time really that we've talked about you again. And because now that we've sort of figured out what their problem is and how they're framing it and how they're thinking about it, we need to sort of insert you in there with a core message. This is what I do. This is the problem that I fix. Okay, now we start getting into context and stuff. Of all the people that they look at, of all the people that they, all the companies, all the coaches, all the vendors, all the job candidates, all the whatever, of all the ones that they look at, even if they only look at 2, they're going to go with the safer choice, the one that feels safer. And you always want to be the safer choice. Now, safer can be conveyed in a lot of ways. Maybe you've spent a lot of time in this industry. Maybe you worked for companies that they've heard of. Maybe you worked for companies just like them. Maybe you worked for their company at one point. Maybe you have a blog where you talk about all of the problems and explain. Maybe you have a video series that helps people understand the problem that they're having and how to get out of it. Maybe you're a public speaker, and so maybe you're a recognized expert in some way. Maybe you're an author. Maybe you wrote the book that community colleges use to teach this subject, right? Maybe you've run so many of these projects that you could do it in your sleep. There's something about you that makes you a safe or safer choice when they're doing the initial evaluation of who they're talking to and who they're going to listen to. You need to think about why they might consider you the safer choice. They're not going to consider you the safer choice because you're unique or fresh or new. Safer is not about the future or what could happen. Safer is about the present and the past. And so all of your elements for why you're the safer choice, you're going to write in here as bullet points. These are all about the present and ideally the past. You're bringing forward from the past characteristics, achievements, facts, and truths that establish why you're the safer or one of the safer choices of the people or companies or vendors that they're looking at. You can't skip this step. And here's why. If you're selling, especially in a B2B context, and let's talk about, for our purposes, what B2B and B2C actually mean. B2C means that the person you're talking to, it doesn't matter if they're the CEO of a $500 million company or they're self-employed. It doesn't matter if they're a consumer buying a pack of gum. B2C simply means the person that you're talking to or pitching to can make the purchase decision all on their own and execute it. But they pull out a credit card, they issue a purchase order or whatever, right? B2B means that no matter who or how many people you're talking to, there are still other people involved. There's purchasing, there's finance, there's a steering committee, there's an executive leadership committee, there's a budget committee, there's, whatever. I think I said procurement, but if I didn't, procurement, or the purchasing department or whatever, or you're talking to the regional VP and that person needs to talk to the national VP or something, right? So whenever you're approaching for the first time or trying to make a contact with or establish a relationship with a company or someone in a B2B environment, and B2B, remember, just means that they're not the final arbiter of the purchase. They at least need sign off from someone else. The first question that goes through their mind, and they're never going to ask you this question, but the first question, the first obstacle, and this is why we're on it for the safer choice, is let's imagine that I'm the person inside the company that you're trying to connect with and start a conversation with. How do I know it's safe for me to vouch for you in here at my company? How do I know that you're not going to implode because you say that you're good, but it turns out every project you do takes 3 times longer and 4 times the budget. And I could end up fired, or I could end up losing reputation at my place of employment because of you, right? If I'm not sure that that's not going to happen, if I don't feel like it's safe for me and my career to vouch for you in the company where I am, to vouch for you to my boss, to vouch for you to the steering committee or whatever, then it doesn't matter how much money you're going to make my company or how much money you're going to save my company, because none of that is worth 100% of my income.
And is that where testimonials will help? No. Will testimonials help this in terms of safer?
Testimonials are partly for that, although you wouldn't normally use testimonials in a positioning statement. It's not wrong. You could, right? If you have like a long sales page, a testimony would be great, right? But just make sure you're answering without ever calling attention to the question in the first place. How do I know it's safe for me to vouch for you in here? By the way, the B2C version of that is, how do I know I won't regret this purchase? Right? But I mostly deal with B2B. So how do I know it's safe for me to vouch for you in here? And this is the number one obstacle, right? Answering this doesn't get you the sale normally, unless it's like a relatively small price point. Answering safer, adequately, or sufficiently doesn't get you the sale, but you don't get any further unless you knock down this hurdle. Or if you're in a larger company and you're in marketing, for instance, it's your job to knock down this hurdle so sales doesn't hit it. And if you're in sales, it's your job to either make marketing knock it down for you before you ever, interact with that person, that prospect, or you need to figure out how to knock it down on your own. But you won't get anywhere until you knock that down.
I missed the turtle. What's with the turtle?
I don't know about the turtle.
Okay.
Next one. Why is it easy to solve their problem if they work with you, right? Because they're in a negative present, which means there's a problem somewhere. They want to get to a positive future, but not every vendor or job candidate or coach or whoever consultant that they hire necessarily makes it easy for them to get to the positive future. So if you have a process, if you have a methodology that you bring to this, if you have solved this exact problem, there's a little bit of overlap with safety. If you've solved this particular problem many, many times, and you've got a project plan ready to go, right? You show up with a 30, 60, 90, like here's what's going to happen in the first 30 days. And then at the 60-day point, and you'll have this. And then, do you take everything off the plate for them and handle it yourself? Do you need to, or should you make sure they understand you don't need to be micromanaged or even managed, and they absolutely can count on any dates that they give you, right? That you won't go over budget. You're very familiar with like what this is going to cost. And if they give you what you tell them it's going to cost, you're not going to come back and say, oops, I underestimated by 75%. So give me 4 times what you cost, give me 10 times what you cost, 25 times what I quoted, whatever, right? So do you take over everything, even the project management? Do you not take over everything? And that's part of the reason why, because most of your competitors come in and just try to impose their will, and it turns out that's hard for companies to adapt to, right? There's no right or wrong answer to any of these. The point is you have to understand and then frame in your positioning message why something is easier if they go with you than someone else, right? Do you guarantee results? Do you guarantee fixed price projects? Do you any kind of guarantee is an example of easy. Like it sounds like it would be an example of safe, but it's actually an example of easy, because then they don't have to think about it anymore or worry about it anymore. They just have one thing to worry about. Did this go through a threshold past which the guarantee said I would never reach, and so I can get my money back, or he owes me something, or it's going to be fixed, or they're going to drop a SWAT team of people on my headquarters and work 24/7 until it's fixed, or whatever, right? So there are reasons why a customer or a hiring manager or whoever's life is easier once you're taking care of this problem for them. You should understand how to do that and how to phrase that. Okay, and then what big thing or notable impact? This is often more suited to people who are representing a company or who are self-employed. You don't see it so much in individual sort of job seekers, although it's possible. But there's some big, now we're really talking about the positive future, right? Now we're talking about like the positive future is not just the absence of this problem. The positive future is something bigger. Like you're now able to do something that you couldn't do before. because you hired whoever it is, company or whatever, they hired you, basically the person writing the positioning message, right? Or something is they can do more of something, they can do something they couldn't do before. They no longer have to do something that they felt they had to do before. They had sort of like legacy commitments, and you figured out a way to thread that needle or thread multiple needles. So, they don't need to provide continued expensive support for all of these old customers who won't upgrade or anything like that. You should understand what the big impact is that you're going to have on their business, and then enunciate on that to explain that, and in just a few words, right? None of these, you'll have potentially lots of bullet points as you go through the workbook on how to answer various questions. You don't want to just throw everything at your audience, right? You're going to pick the one or two that are most important, or the one or two that make you stand out from competitors or whatever, and those are the ones that you're going to focus on the most. So there's some kind of big thing. There's some sort of happiness that you can provide, or pain relief that you can provide, and sort of like a pain relief that washes over someone. That's what you're selling. And so those are the bullet points you want to add in here. All right. Now, this used to be called question 8 because in the original set of 10 questions for pitching that weren't part of the workshop, but were part of a structure for how to do your messaging, we used to call this number 8. And it's like, how does it work? Now, the more technical your field is, as opposed to the more sort of personal service oriented that it is, the more technical your offering or field is, the more likely you're trying to answer this question early in the process, right? And you shouldn't. But at some point, you need to understand, of course, you need to be able to say how your product, your service, whatever works, like what exactly you provide. And this goes to a trust issue. So a couple of tips about answering, like, how does your offering work, or like, what does it include, or what doesn't it include, and so on. If you were giving a present, let's put this in terms of like a pitch deck or a presentation you're giving to, you finally got the meeting, you're going to talk to them and so on. This is the only section of that presentation where you want to slightly overwhelm your audience. So if you have a complicated diagram, let's say going back earlier to why it was easy to work for you, and it's because you've got this entire sort of workflow process. And so they input their problem here, and then you handle all the decision trees and the yes, no's, and then ultimately it comes out to here, right? Feel free to show that. Feel free to show a diagram on a slide that's as complicated as you want to make it, right? So complicated that people won't even be listening to you. They'll just be reading what's on the slide, trying to figure out what the workflow is. You want to slightly overwhelm your audience, because the underlying message, the overt message is, here are the details, and here are the features, or here's what you and I will achieve in a personal service. Let's say it's a coaching kind of business. Here's what you and I will achieve by the end of the first week, or the first, 2 weeks or a month or whatever. The underlying two messages you're conveying here are: A, I've done, or my company has done all the thinking on this, and we've done all the work on it. So you don't have to. Like, basically what you're saying is, you can shortcut to the positive future if you give us money, to put it as bluntly as possible. So remember, as you're putting down your details of like what you offer, what you sell, what you're doing for the money that you're getting, the underlying messages are: we've done all the thinking on this, or I've done all the thinking on this if you're on your own, right? We've done all the work. You can shortcut to your positive future if you just give us money, and we'll do this for you. So don't spend too much time ever in a positioning statement explaining how your offering works. But if you can sum it up in a short sentence and something punchy, or no more than 2 short sentences, never have one long sentence if you can have 2 short sentences. But if you can do it in 1 or 2 short sentences, that's your goal, because it helps you position, it helps you answer safer, it helps you answer the positive future and easy, it helps you answer the impact a little bit, questions above, but it sums it up by providing concrete details. Okay, this is this when I do this one-on-one with people, I tell them this is the question where all of the money that I make, all the value I provide is in this question. So let's talk about this one for a second. First of all, you're probably not new. The smaller your company is, the less likely you are to be new. And the bigger your company is, it's almost impossible to be new. Like new as in, or let me put it this way. For every Uber, there's 1,000 companies that'll say we're the Uber of something. We're the Uber of prison laundry delivery in the Boston area, right? We're the Walmart of this. We're the Netflix of that, right? There are very few new companies. So I don't try to figure out how someone is new. Novelty and getting someone's attention, very important in messaging and copywriting. But new has a built-in disadvantage in that you have to explain to people and educate the market what you are. So there are I bet not of the, we said 200 something of these that I've done so far. I bet not 5 out of 200 plus times has the client actually qualified as being new. Right? And even then, they were new because of a geographical area they operated in. They were the first type of company in this region or this city. They weren't like new. So don't worry about the fact that you're not new. In fact, it's in many ways, it's an advantage if you're not new. I also don't put really any stock in unique. The problem with unique is that literally every company and every person can be shown to be unique. Unique is just assembling Lego blocks. I went to this school and I'm from this area and I deal with customers in this industry and in this vertical who are experiencing this problem. You can just stack them like Legos and then you're technically unique, but you're probably not unique in a way that anyone cares about. And so I don't put any effort into figuring out how my clients are unique so that I can convey that to their prospects. Different is everything. Different is your angle, right? Different is, okay, this is where I tell the horse lady story. I apologize if you've heard the horse lady story before.
I was thinking about Apple used to have their slogan, think different.
Yeah. So if you've heard the horse lady story before or too many times, I apologize. But here's the horse lady story as an example. So let's say you're going to go find and hire someone that you've never hired before. And in this case, the horse lady happens to be a therapist. It could be a welder. It could be a life coach. It could be a plumber. It could be whatever, right? But in this case, it's your first ever time looking for your very first ever therapist. If you're going to have like therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, something like that. And so you go wherever you would normally go to do an initial search. You go to Google, you go to Facebook, you go to LinkedIn, you go to wherever, right? And then the next day, your friend, your mother, your spouse says, hey, so how's it going? Looking for, your therapist. And you say, not bad, not bad. I looked fairly deeply into 5 of them. 4 of them, pretty similar. You go to their office, usually in like a office building or a medical center or something. And, converted Victorian house downtown that someone used to live in, and now it's been converted into little offices, right? You go to their office, you sit down, they ask you questions and you talk about yourself, right? So like 4 of them get amalgamated into one therapist. And then you say, and then there was the horse lady. And she says, you don't go to her office, you go out to this nearby farm. She puts you on the sweetest, gentlest old horse you've ever seen. She gets on one. And then just very slowly, going down a path, she asks you questions and you talk about yourself. Now, they're selling exactly the same thing, right? The 4 that got amalgamated into one and the horse lady, they're selling the same thing. It's the same service. There can be variety, in anything in life, but for legal and ethical and licensing and board certification kind of reasons, there has to be a lot of similarity. So you've got 4 who are so similar that you can't even individually remember them anymore. They get amalgamated, consolidated, combined into that therapist. And then there's the horse lady. And chances are she's the horse lady because she happens to like horses. So she took something from her life and combined it in an interesting way with her business. That's sort of just an extra bonus. It's not even what this positioning thing is about. That's more of a what's your passion superpower kind of thing. And we're not covering that here. The point is the horse lady doesn't win all the business, but she's A, the only one who's remembered on her own the next day, and she B, wins a disproportionate amount of the business because you remembered her. And so you're always looking for an angle. You're selling the same thing that other people do. You're doing the same services other people do, right? You're doing the same job and working with Excel in, the same, mid-tier corporate position that everyone else is or whatever, right? But there's an angle that you can think through and approach it with that gives you your story. Now, the nice part about an angle is that it doesn't require that you've already got something. It doesn't require you to buy anything. It doesn't require you to invest any money. It only requires mental effort to play around and think through and apply your imagination, right? Everyone has great imagination. Apply your imagination to come up with an angle, why you're different from everyone else. You're not completely different from everyone else. You overlap. If it was a Venn diagram with two circles, you'd be like almost that much, right? Like they're almost completely overlapping each other. But there's a little bit where they don't, and that angle, that spot is what you're going to stake out for your positioning statement. So take time to think what you can combine with what you sell or what you can take away, what kind of customers you should leave behind and not try to approach anymore, or which ones you want to highlight that you have, types of customers or individual customers, right? Think about what in your business or life, and we're going to go through some questions related to this, by the way, that'll help you clarify this. But what makes you different and gives you a different story on that initial set of approaches to a prospect or a customer so that you can be remembered the next day. Ultimately, the whole goal of this thing is to be remembered the next day as you tell them their story with you in it. Guys, any questions? I know you've heard the horse lady story so many times at this point. Oh, they might be on mute. Nope. Well, I can't hear you. So
I'm in multiple windows. That's the problem.
I bet you are. Yeah.
I'm in YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. So.
Oh. Well, all the YouTube type stuff. Well, that's okay. Go ahead. I know you've heard the horse lady story many times, so hopefully you kept you awake while I was telling it. But it's a great story, right? It's a great example. It's made up, of course, but it's a great story in that she didn't spend any extra money. She probably combined something, this fictitious person that I made up completely from whole cloth, right? She probably combined something in her life that she enjoyed or was passionate about. Mm-hmm. But she did it to give herself a story and stand out. And it cost most likely nothing. Mm-hmm. It just required imagination. And it's worth your time to apply your imagination instead of trying to buy interruption and mind share with advertising, at least in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. It can save you a lot of money down the road too. Okay, so this is sort of the last of the core questions that we would do. This is, I think we're around number, what is this, 11? Yeah, so of 21. So what I would tell folks is someone, if you're lucky, someone of the 5 or so people that they're looking at for as their next strategy coach, their next CMO, their next, accountant, their next finance employee, their next HR person, if it's a job, like whatever, chances are someone is going to stand out a little more than someone else. You should aim to be that person. Now that's sort of a truism. Obviously, Dean, I want to be the one person they remember, but I want to think about it this way. Okay. Everyone watching this live event right now, or if you're watching it in a video, you watch this tomorrow. If you're lucky, you'll remember 10% of this entire thing. Any article, any news story, anything that you encounter today, you're only going to remember about 10% of it tomorrow. And that's not a wide generalization. It's really well known as far as human memory goes. There's a drastic drop off 24 hours later. Now, if they're only going to remember 10%, there's no reason why you can't choose what that 10% is. If you walked away from this session remembering nothing except Dean's the guy who talked about telling people their own story with me in it, that's enough, right? That's why it's repeated several times throughout this whole session. you should pick the 10% you want them to walk away from, because you don't want to leave it to them to decide what 10% they're going to remember. That 10% might not be your main theme. So you think about an image or a sound or an emotion that you can convey, similar to you're going to tell these people their own story with you in it. There's something in your messaging, there's something in your positioning that's the equivalent of that. You should pick it and then hammer the bejesus out of it in your messaging, because they're going to remember something. They're going to forget almost everything. They're going to remember something probably, and you want to control that and influence that as much as possible. If you don't, you're wasting an opportunity to be the person who's remembered the next day. Now, some of this can come from the previous question, right? If you do a good job with your imagination of figuring out an angle that matters, but an angle that's, different enough, then that's usually what they'll remember. But just in case, or if you think that, okay, that's pretty good, but I'd like to fortify that, then spend some time in question 11 on how you would fortify and strengthen and make more visual or more vivid or more emotional whatever you answered in number 10. Completely worth the time. Take a long walk, get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, sit down, put on some headphones, and just force yourself to think about this. You only have to do it once, but it's so valuable forever going forward. And the lesson, by the way, of every presentation you do, every talk you give, understanding they're only going to remember 10% of everything you ever tell anyone or show anyone in the future, and deciding up front what that 10% should be, it's a very valuable exercise that you can repeat over and over and over. It has a great payoff. All right, so that's the end of the core questions. And then we start getting into some of the more interesting, I think, strategy and interaction kind of questions. So we talked about the negative present, right? They have a problem, the present. They have a problem now. That's what makes the present negative. We talked about positive future, which is you're going to shortcut them to a happy place, or your company's products are going to shortcut them to a happy place where that, they now have what they didn't have, or they've managed to get rid of something they did have and they didn't want, like a problem, or, something that's costing too much money or whatever, right? The other concept that we haven't gotten into is negative future. Now, if you're in B2B, you sell in B2B, you sell to companies. This is the toughest question to come up against, because in a B2B scenario, there's virtually no risk to any individual on the customer side to postpone or delay and not make a decision today. Now, very briefly, I'll go into why. Generally speaking, I mean, you're basically asking the why now? Why should I do this now question, right? And that is, if you've ever been in a sales meeting where you need to convince 5 or 6 people on the customer side in some little conference room that holds 8 people, why now? Why they should act now? It's virtually usually an impossible question to answer. You certainly don't want to be sandbagged or surprised by it. And the reason is that in B2B, there is no scarcity. Most of the time, the risk of doing nothing is something won't be available. Oh, you don't want to buy that Springsteen ticket today? It might not be around tomorrow, right? Or you don't want to schedule the surgery for next week? Well, the only other time I have is 4 months from now, at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. 4 months is a long time to wait. We don't know what's going to go wrong between now and 4 months from now, right? There's no scarcity in B2B. You could offer them, hey, I'll give you, we're doing 10% discounts on everybody who buys before the end of Q4, and it's only Q2, right? There's no scarcity even with that, even though you think you've put a time limit on it, because they're going to come back to you in Q1 of the following year and say, hey, that discount you offered us, we'd like to have that now. And what are you going to say? You're either going to say yes, because you got to have the business, or B, you're going to say no, and they're going to go to a competitor. We all have competitors, and they're going to get it there. So there's no scarcity in B2B selling and B2B marketing. And that's why you pretty much only have 3 options. You need to paint a picture of a negative future and understand what the negative future for them could be. And then either their competitors are going to make gains against them, or they're going to lose money every day until they pull the trigger. Those tend to be the only three things. Now, of course, the latter two, right, losing money every day or a competitor eating their lunch, those technically count as a negative future. But the negative future has to be your theme for what's the risk if they do nothing. Like, there's a negative future, paint it very quickly, and then say, but you're not going to have to worry about that because of X, and X happens to be you or what you sell. But do spend some time thinking about all the risks they face if they don't do anything to fix this problem. You can start small and work your way up to big. You can start big and work your way up to small. It doesn't matter. But try to get a list of a handful of those. You're never going to list all of them for them, but showing and knowing and having them in your pocket, knowing that you've got, the options and what's likely to happen for them, it's very powerful. It comes through in your messaging, even if you only point to maybe one of them. Similarly, what's the risk if you don't deliver? You want to be able to show that you're as bulletproof a choice as possible. Now, some of these questions are touch on each other, right? This is safer, right? It's a safer question to some degree. The idea is you should understand the risk if you don't deliver, so that you can sort of preempt that objection early on in your message, or you're ready to answer it in an FAQ or something if you're talking about a web page, a sales page, something like that. Right? Now, you don't call out, hey, and if we don't fix your problem, blah, blah, blah. It's not normally something you'd see printed. The written word is not normally where you'd put that, but you should have it in your head at least in case someone brings it up, or if you sense reluctance or that they're not buying into the reasons why you're the safe choice or why you're the way to get to their positive future the easy way. It's better that you ask yourself and answer these questions now than to get sandbagged by them later. All right. If you get to choose, sometimes you do. If you get to choose after they hire you, what you would focus on first, what is it? There's no one who won't listen as your conversation steers into, or your sales page or your bio or your presentation to them or your pitch or whatever. There's no one who won't listen if you start a sentence with, if we agree that I'm going to fix this for you, the first thing I'm going to work on and fix or address, or the first thing I'm giving priority to, is X. Like, everyone stops and listens. They were thinking, am I on the hook to pick up the kids from school today, or is that someone else? Right? Did I leave the iron on? Am I supposed to go to some thing this evening? Like, do I need to check my calendar for that? It doesn't matter. If you say the first thing that I'm going to, if hired, work on is X, they're going to stop and wait and find out what X is. Everybody, human brains love to know what the first next thing is. Right? There's built-in novelty there. There's built-in importance and gravitas to it. Everyone will stop and listen to that. You should know what you're going to focus on first. And if they're going to disagree, then the time to find that out is now, not later. I don't know. Did we skip 14? No, we did 14. Oh, I guess we did. Oh, I moved 14. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We actually handled it earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for keeping an eye on it. Excuse me. Okay. The next one to work through and give examples of, for yourself at least, is how are you an advocate for them against their rivals? Chances are you don't work for everyone in that industry. You might have one or two customers that are direct competitors to each other. I mean, especially if you're a small company, it's unlikely that you sell to all of them, unless it's something sort of transactional that's a part of something bigger. And, it's not a competitive threat if they buy their widget from you, because literally everyone has to buy this widget in order to do X. So that's not what we're talking about. But if you're, a consultant, if you're a fractional executive, if you're a vendor, if you provide some kind of service, how are you an advocate for them and against their rivals? Now, a lot of people will not have an answer to this. A lot of companies even will not have an answer to this. But if you do have an answer to it, like, oh, not only am I, do I sell into this market, but I'm on this board, I belong to this association, right? I donate to these causes of political candidates or whatever. You should have that ready to go. And it doesn't directly contribute to safer as a concept, but it does contribute to we're part of the same group, we're fighting the same battles. Earlier on, we had that slide where, like, why are they in this situation? And remember, it's not their fault. And I don't think I remember how the entire quote goes, but there's a saying in marketing and copywriting that people will do anything for those who support their dreams, throw rocks at their enemies, and so on, and a few other things, right? So if you can show that you're throwing rocks at their enemies and supporting like their dreams, and I know that's kind of like squishy language, like forgive me for that because it's not normally how I deal with these things, but you're supporting you're supporting them and their industry and the people in it, and you're against, like, if you sell to, what's an example? If you sell to the fast food industry, then you're against the sit down restaurant industry and probably restaurant regulation of some kind, right? Like, show that you're in their group, and outside of the relationship between you and that prospect, you're also, advocating on behalf of who and what they are, and not just who and what they are to you, and then against their rivals. You may or may not include this in your positioning message, certainly not like an elevator pitch, potentially, but have it in your pocket and have it on sort of any of your long form position things like a sales page or how you describe yourself on a one sheet when you're a guest on a podcast or a TV show or something. Okay. What's hard or expensive for them and easy for you? So at this point, we're not talking about the prospects. We're talking about your competition. So is there something that they have to do that you don't have, and spend money on and time on or resources that you don't have to because you sort of like came on later? Is there something that for whatever reason you're able to source or do much more cheaply than they are? Maybe you have a relationship with another company or some really spectacular contractors or whatever, right? There's a company overseas that I do that what's the word? They white label me. So they have certain customers where something needs to be done very, very quickly. And as you might have come across, and if you've ever watched any of our Wednesday shows, I'm able to rewrite these websites very, very fast. And so they'll actually be able to compete on time in a way that their competitors would not be able to commit to once they confirm that I have availability for them. There's something that you can do. There's something you don't have to spend money on. There's something that you own. There's an advantage that you have. There's a resource you have access to. There are people in your network or something that you know where you are cheaper or faster or better or easier to work with, or you're able to offer a guarantee that someone else isn't, or something. You're able to combine multiple things to provide a broader solution, or you're willing to niche down into just one thing maybe, or one or two things, but be the very best in that one thing, or the cheapest or the fastest or whatever. Go ahead and spend time thinking about what's probably hard or expensive for your competitors. And then by definition, as soon as you write that, you'll look at your own company or your own offering and you say, oh yeah, well, actually I'm better off in that than they are. So take some time and think about your advantages from a customer's point of view, right? So understand, if you're able to do X and your competitor isn't, or you're able to do X in half the time, but the prospect doesn't care because it's not actually relevant to them how long it takes, because there are other things in that project, for instance. And so as long as the whole project is done at the date that's promised, I don't care if it takes company A 3 weeks to do it and it takes company B 5 weeks to do it. If by week 9, all the pieces are done and they were, done in an order and it makes sense and I can deploy, right? I come from a tech background, so I think about that, deployment kind of stuff, standing it up kind of stuff. But if there's something that might matter to them, like I can do this whole project for you in 7.5 weeks, and I've done it 4,000 times in the past for 7.5 weeks, because I include this and I have this contact, we have this partner, and we don't do this part. I said, well, I don't care about that part. I'm not, we don't do that in our business anyway. I said, if you don't do that and you don't need it, 7.5 weeks and we're out. Like that's worth talking about. That is memorable. That's like a horse lady element, right? So think about their disadvantages, the competitor's disadvantages, your advantages, and which of those would matter to the person that you're talking to, and then fortify and double down on those. Guys, I've been talking for a while. I need to take a sip of drink. Do you have any questions or comments?
Well, there's a question from Dr. Chavin K. He says, after finishing the positioning workbook, how do we know if our pitch is working properly or how to improve it? How do we evaluate it? I just suggested just keep testing it, but I'm sure you have some more detailed answers.
Oh, no. There's a shortcut to testing it to know if it's going to work, right? There's a shortcut to testing it. First of all, the whole point is it needs to be simple enough that like a fifth grader would understand it. Like you're looking at fifth grade language. You go to something like HemingwayApp.com or use Grammarly or something and get it down to like a fifth or sixth grade level, no higher than seventh grade level. No matter how technical your field is, you can get it down an initial, opening statement. You can get it down to like seventh grade, sixth grade.
I thought we were down to fourth grade now. No,
I aim for fourth grade, but
okay.
I charge a lot to do that, right?
To do,
yeah. It's not natural for people who've graduated from college or university to write at anything below a grade 15 level, actually.
Yeah.
It's very tough. Okay. So anyway, the answer to the question is the easiest way to, it sounds so trite. I'm already half embarrassed to talk about it, right? But you simply go to someone who kind of understands what business you're in, but isn't really involved in it. So, your best friend, your spouse, someone like that. And I would just test it there because not because your message is so generic that people who don't understand your industry are going to get it. I mean, that would be great if it worked, but it's not really reality. But what you're trying to do is you're not trying to find someone who matches the customer's technical and sort of business expertise and knowledge in that domain. You're testing to see if you can keep the attention of someone. And someone, your spouse, your friend, or whatever. I mean, they're going to give you like what in another course we call courtesy attention. You give everyone like a few seconds of attention. And they say, hey, can you like listen to this and tell me what you think? They'll give you a few seconds. But if you haven't like managed to keep their attention by 5 or 6 seconds in, that's a good proxy for how much attention you're going to get from a prospect, not because they don't understand what you're saying, but because they have a lot of people trying to say similar things to them. So you go to someone who doesn't really know, or if you have a friend who works in the industry, you could pitch it there. I mean, that might work. But the point is, you want to get and keep their attention, right? That's why we tell them their story with you in it. You're going to get and keep their attention. And really all you're looking for as a proxy is someone who would only give you a few seconds of courtesy attention, and then their eyes start to glaze over. If you can keep their eyes from glazing over because they understand and they're starting to visualize things as you talk about your position and like what your story, your pitch, your intro, then it doesn't matter who you test it on. They just need to have the similar level of initial attention, not an actual technical domain knowledge of what you're talking about.
So glazing over should only apply to donuts, not to your prospect size.
And some cakes, but that's it.
Some cakes too. Okay.
Don't leave the cakes out.
From the horse lady to the cake man.
Okay. Now this question is similar to the last one. Remember the last one was what's hard or expensive for them and easy for you. This is something that's a tiny bit deeper, and I want to go into it for a second. It won't apply to necessarily everyone, but if you might end up changing your business or your offering based on your answer to this question, right? So let me put it in technical terms. Let's say you make a CRM product, or you make a SaaS product, or you make some sort of equipment, right? Farm equipment or whatever. I mean, as an example, you think about John Deere, right? John Deere's been selling tractors for a really, really, really long time. And a lot of people have very old John Deere tractors. And John Deere, to some degree, even though I'm sure it's profitable for them, they have to keep making parts for machines that they don't even produce anymore. They just make the parts, but not the whole machine, right? They're stuck in a sense with this legacy set of customers and the legacy expectations. And they can't really walk away from that very easily. Now, hopefully it's profitable for them, but even if it isn't, to some degree, they have to keep going with it. Whereas if you are a brand new tractor company, on the one hand, you don't have the large pre-built installed base of a John Deere, but on the other hand, you get to start fresh and not have to carry a big legacy load. Does it make sense?
That has changed with new John Deeres, though.
Yeah, right, and that's one of the reasons.
Yeah,
but there are still hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of John Deere tractors around the world, and they all need parts.
Absolutely, we could always get them fixed.
Yeah.
Fresh
so
tractor.
There's going to be stuff. If your competition has been around for a while, or your competition moved into your field from another field, or your competition has a mindset or a culture that they can't shake, and it's not as nimble, it's not as well adapted to the subset of the market you're going after or whatever. If there's anything that your typical competitor or specific competitors, if you can come up with it, that they kind of have to do, they have to keep providing, they have to maintain, and you don't have to, that's a competitive advantage that needs to make its way into your positioning message. So let's give me an example of anybody, and I'll see if I can come up with an example that illustrates this. Give me any business, any market, any profession. Give me something, anything.
You can do funeral directors, but we've done that before. What's their distinctive difference?
Funeral directors. I mean, like strategy coaches, right?
Cheap baskets.
Let's like strategy coaches. So you have a coaching business. You tend to help companies with their, let's be even more specific, their marketing strategy. Okay. By the way, I have no idea what I'm about to say because I've never thought about this on this particular example before. But you're up against, let's say, 4 other people who made it to the vendor list, the selection list. And, just based on online research that people have done, most customers and prospects these days, they do between 60 and 85% of their research online before they ever talk to a vendor. And that's how they eliminate people. So you're one of 5 strategy consultants, marketing strategy consultants. And the other, and this particular prospect or customer is in the, I don't know, they what would they do? They're the marketing department of a manufacturing company, like a high-tech manufacturing company, like a specialty plastics or something. And chances are your competitors are going to come from this is not a market that's so big that you find a lot of people from marketing coming out. In fact, most people coming out of who are in marketing in a manufacturer, quite a high percentage of them are engineers and people who are like marketing needed to be done. So they were assigned marketing when the company was smaller, and now they're the marketing person for that company, right? And so they're trying to make a decision on strategy, and they're looking at why you're safer, what kind of big impact you can make, what kind of, most of your competitors are going to come, or you can paint your competitors as they've come from other fields, but they're not well suited to this one thing, right? They have to keep in mind that this other group of customers, that's sort of their main bread and butter, like that's who they're going to give priority to. That's one way of doing it, right? You can say there are other customers, the customers of your competitors, right, are not in this industry for the most part. They're competitors to this industry. It's like they're not going to cut their customer to pick you up, even though you're rivals. I don't have any other currently customers in your particular field. So my attention is not divided, my loyalties are not divided, and all of my expertise is going into helping you as we throw rocks at their rivals, right? Helping you, grow and move forward. There's always something that you can paint where you think you tell them your competitor has to do this or maintain this or support X, and you don't have to. It's worthwhile taking 5 minutes and trying to write that out in bullet or a little mind map or something for yourself.
But do you get into a me too? Like we have that also, or is that not a good thing?
Ask me that question differently because I don't think I understood it.
Oh, well, so you have this, so it's written here on my little worksheet. Is there something that your competition has to do, provide, or maintain that you don't? Oh, I see. I misread the question. I thought it was something that your competition has that you don't, and then you have to
no, they have commitments
okay.
in some way, right? Financial, manufacturing, legacy, whatever. There's some they're carrying, they're chained to this boulder, and they have to carry it around, and you don't have to.
Boulders
it's good
and rocks.
to know it, point out to the customer how look at it this way. If your competition was old enough that they had all of this legacy stuff, on the one hand, they're using that as a strength. Like, look how solid and stable we are. We've been around for 25 years. So your approach, because remember, every weakness is a strength. You just have to reframe it that way. So your weakness of being newer is not that it's not really a weakness. It's a strength. Like, every dollar that you pay these guys, some portion of that is going to support the non-profitable parts and non-profitable customers that they can't get rid of.
Yeah. We're nimble.
I don't put that burden on you.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's another lesson, by the way. It was in the little video we played in the beginning. Every weakness is a strength. In marketing, every weakness is a strength. You just have to reframe it. Okay. Related to an earlier one, but a little spice added to it. So is there something you can add to your offer for little or no cost that they might want to hear about? So for instance, if you're going in and you're talking about X and Y, but you can also add on this other little thing that they hadn't thought about, and it's very nominal, but none of the competitors are talking about it, then that's fantastic. You know, not only do I do 1 and 2 and 3, but I'll give you an example. Okay. On the WayeCreative.com/pricing page, there's a set of options for fractional executives, mostly fractional CMOs and entrepreneurs. And one of the things that's added in there, besides doing a lot of this writing for them, all my clients have to go through this workshop, like a one-to-one version, but then I do the writing. You guys are going to do your own writing, but I do the writing for them. But one of the things we do is we add on a video clip. We create 3 questions and then record me or someone else interviewing the client. And they've already, of course, got the questions, and they know the questions, and they've even got the answers prepped because we've made the answers for them, right? To be remembered the next day and all that kind of stuff. And then we just give them that. It's not a whole podcast or anything. It's just a video clip. They put it on, they post it on social media. It becomes one of the featured things in their LinkedIn page, you know, in the featured section of your LinkedIn profile page stuff, right? It looks like an excerpt of an interview, which technically it is. And that's completely additional. The only reason we offer it is because we've got everything set up. We have the mics and the monitors and the multicams, the teleprompters, and, you know, the high speed, you know, gigabit up, gigabit down internet and optical, you know, fiber optic and everything else, right? So it doesn't cost anything other than a tiny bit of time, because all the questions and answers are all derived from their answers to this workshop. And then the other stuff that I write for them, like their pitch deck, stuff like that. So it takes it's like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah, to do the actual recording, and then they have the video, and no one else offers the video.
Yeah, the repurposed content is super valuable. Yeah.
So that's an example of something that I could offer at little or no cost that they would like to hear about, and my competitors don't think to offer it because they're writers, they're not video people. You've almost certainly got assets or something, either from equipment and stuff that you've already, you know, purchased for some other purpose, or you've got partners, you've got friends in business who can do certain things. You have a way to package things together, whatever. You have something that you can add to an offer that your competitors won't, that the customer, even if most of them don't take you up on it, they're interested in it and it sets you apart. So, you know, work through that. Spend 5 minutes and try to think about of the people I know who could be, you know, who could do this for me. How do I make my offer? How do I stack it taller? How do I make it broader? Right? How do I go in depth in something? I'll do this part for you, and then once that's done, I'm going to hand you off to my colleague, my partner, you know, my friend, my, you know, corporate, whatever. Right? And if you decide to go even deeper, they've got a deep specialization. Once this part's done, they pick that up and take it further. Right? So just think it through, because it's, again, that's you telling them their story with you in it now, and you're bringing elements and capabilities they didn't have before. All right, that's 19, and we're almost out of time. I think we're going to make it. No, this is the smaller the business, especially one-person businesses, the tougher this section can get. as far as me trying to convince them to even do this question. But even if it isn't your favorite thing, is there something that if you put more weight on it would yield sales results for you?
We encounter that with people who refuse to do short form videos.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Well, so for a lot of
While I drink.
people, John is big on this, which is they lack the camera confidence and they're afraid to push the
Yeah.
button. They are afraid of technology. They're worried about running out of things to say. And John removes all those objections and a lot of those fears from them. And as a result, if they don't do these videos, they don't reach people. And it's one of those things where getting your face on the camera instead of always using PowerPoints and slides is the key to building that rapport and resonance so that people actually do buy from you. But there's a lot of resistance amongst professionals in particular, in terms of doing short form video.
When I worked in sales, yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to add on, and it's funny, especially today, all we really need to do our videos is our little mobile pocket studio, and we can do just so much. They make professional movies with these things now.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. And
when I was in sales, my manager used to, like, in any given day in sales, there's lots of things you don't want to do, like routine tasks and the grind and stuff you don't want to do, and that can make prioritization for what you're going to work on today like tough, and it's easy to procrastinate. But I had one manager once who had the easiest possible way to think about this. And he said, whenever you're looking at your day and you're like, deals that are open, that are not closed and stuff, just like, where's the closest dollar? Like, which one of these could close fastest and earliest if you like put focus on it? And then unless you have some reason to not work on your closest dollar, just work on your closest dollar. Now, for let's translate that from corporate sales and software sales to like a very small business, right? There are people who are thinking, oh man, like I cannot deal with any more dentist offices. Like I'm just kind of, I know that the money is there, and I know that I can, it's popular product, popular service. I know they get value out of it. I'm just kind of done with dentists, right? I'm finished with it. Well, that's great. And it's your choice, and you can like forego that money. You can forego. And of course, with a lot of people, the smaller your company is, it takes a certain amount of time for every customer. And that means you can't work on something else, right? There's synchronous work where if you're working on something or with a person, you can't be doing anything else. That also makes money. And there's asynchronous work where you're like disconnected and the work you do is not tied to a particular date or time or interaction with somebody, right? And in my own business, it's a tough balance between synchronous work and asynchronous work. But if you don't know what to do next, just look at the closest dollar. Or if there's an activity that would start, even though you don't find it pleasant, if you don't find prospecting pleasant, if you don't find outreach on LinkedIn pleasant, if you really don't want to make another phone call, if you've given so many speeches or so many presentations to so many industry groups or big companies or whatever, and like you're just kind of done with it. If you're done with it, you're done with it. But at least ask yourself this question first. Because if this is where the next closest dollar is, then either figure out a way to do it more efficiently, figure out a way to do it with less effort, figure out a way to do it with less time, figure out a way to automate it, but at least put weight on it and get it underway and doing its own thing. Hire like a part-time person or a college kid or whatever to, do it for you, but don't forego it. It's a question that we think, oh, I'm so precious and I'm so creative and I'm so special. And so I shouldn't have to deal with that kind of stuff anymore. If that's where the closest dollar is, then, go do that or figure out a way to do it efficiently so it sort of runs on its own. And then you can go, walk through the fields and smell the flowers and come up with the next great business.
The automation is key, though, because, for example, we tell clients all the time, small business, entrepreneurs, executive coaches, business coaches, to post on their social media platform of choice twice a day, every single day. And the vast majority won't do it. So we automate it for them because it's just going to fall through the cracks. And people have a perception of those businesses who don't have a good, regular, active social presence that, if they can't do this regularly, what else is falling through the cracks?
And there's something else, no matter what business you're in, there's an equivalent to that. If you're not the kind of business that would really post to Instagram much or LinkedIn, then you're the kind of business that would send out a newsletter. You're the kind of business that would book more talks,
more posts on LinkedIn,
whatever, right? Okay. And then question 21, sort of the flip side of the same coin of the previous question. This one was, what could start making money or bringing money if you started putting focus on it right now? This is, who's starving or will be soon?
I'm on intermittent fasting, so I am.
There you go. I mean, this comes down to, I forget where this came from, but I think it's from Harvard Business Review or something, where some professor asked the class, I think like an MBA class, if you ran a hot dog stand, like what's the most important or most desirable thing you would want, right? And people are talking about like, fast service, good quality hot dogs, good location, whatever. But it turns out the answer is a starving crowd. Like if you could have a food truck with crappy hot dogs parked outside a football game as the stadium, empties, and you're going to do fine.
Yeah.
Right. So somewhere there's probably or might be a starving crowd or people who will be starving soon. Like if you're looking forward, for instance, right now, keeping an eye on sort of like inflation and the possibility of a recession and so on. Some people are going to be starving. Some people are going to be hurting. Some of those are going to have money to buy their way out of this problem. Like, is there anything related to that fits your business? So who's hurting now or who will be hurting soon? Or who's starving now or who's starving soon? Right? Because then that's sort of the last tumbler in the lock for your positioning message. Because if you can get in front of the people who are starving or are hurting or will soon, and they know it or can quickly be convinced and shown that they're going to be starving or hurting, then your positioning message is going to fall right into place for them. That key's going to go all the way in.
Thinking about that food truck up at SoFi Stadium when the Bills beat the Rams tonight.
All right. And then this is not related. I added this on at the last minute. It is not normally part of my workshop, but this is courtesy of a guy called Alex Hormozi, Hormozi. And he's come up with this equation for your offer. So like once you sort of got your positioning message in place, this is your offer. So how this breaks down is on the left-hand side, you can see there's an up arrow and a down arrow. So you want the stuff above the line to become bigger, higher, whatever. And you want the stuff below the line to decrease. So he says the key to a compelling offer when you say, so like you've given your position message and say, so like, brass tacks, we provide this and this, characterized by this and this. So the desired outcome is what the customer wants as their positive future. I'll put this in the terms that we've been using all along. The likelihood is the percentage of the amount of belief the prospect has that you are the one that can deliver that positive future, right? If they don't think you can deliver it, it doesn't matter what you tell them, it's not going to work. And so you want to show that the outcome, what they're going to get, their positive future, is as good as you can think you can make it. And that the likelihood is very much the safety question, right? It's like, I've done this for lots of people, I'll be able to do it for you. And then on the downside, the thing is, it's a division, ultimately a division equation, right? You can give these numbers between 1 and 10. So let's say outcome was 7, likelihood was 8, right? And so like the higher the number on those two elements, the better. But because it's a division equation, you can actually like move the needle much faster by bringing the stuff below the line down instead of worrying about making grander claims and throwing on more services and stuff. So if you're able to show that you can deliver something in much less time than they're used to, or that your competitors can do, either A, because you've stripped away everything that isn't important to the client, or you've super focused and super niched on something, or for instance, the client has to do things or maintain things that you don't because they're an older company, or they're just bloated, or their culture is very slow moving, right? If you can greatly reduce the amount of time or greatly reduce the amount of sacrifice that the client has to do. Sacrifice means either the amount of people they have to assign to work with you, the amount of time, the amount of effort they're going to have to put into it, the amount of money they're going to have to spend. If you can deliver it with way less sacrifice on their part, then the number, it's actually more beneficial to drop something below the line by 1 or 2 out of 10 than it is to increase something above the line by 1 or 2 out of 10. In fact, if you can get time down, if it typically takes, on a scale of 1 to 10, it takes your competitor 7, and you can get the time down to 4, suddenly you've got a very compelling final number out of all this. It's pretty amazing. And all right, I think that's it for us today. That is, I think, my final slide. Is that my final slide? That's my final slide. So we're done. I really hope you enjoyed this. WayeCreative.com/event. If for some reason you did not grab any of the bonuses, the booklets, the workbook for this or whatever, if you're going to watch this as a video, the page, like I said earlier, won't be up forever, but it is up now and it will be up for a few days. So go ahead, grab it and start filling in your own answers to this. By the time you're done, you're going to look at it and say, okay, now I have a very different but complete view of my positioning and messaging and what I want to say to prospects in order to get that crucial in-depth meeting that puts me on the path to being, getting the engagement, getting the sale. Thanks very much, Dr. V. Thanks so much, John. I'm Dean Waye. Hope this was helpful to you folks. There'll be an email going out tomorrow for everyone who registered on the LinkedIn page with some follow-up links and stuff to just sort of cement everything you needed. And a thanks for that, by the way. Thanks for attending. This was a lot of fun, the longest one we've ever done. Really appreciate it. And goodbye. Bye. Bye, guys.